Well, Jim, one topic that has come up a lot the last several days, of course, this coincided with the period of time that you were off the computer, unfortunately, and we had just been talking about his health issues, or what we had thought about his recent health issues, the passing of Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff.
Yeah, and that you told me about that on the phone on, I guess, Monday afternoon or whatever, but it obviously wasn't totally unexpected with what we had heard and seen over the past couple of weeks with him. Obviously his health had been failing, and he'd had the battles with cancer that we talked about and everything. And the clip that we just did 2 weeks ago, we told some various stories and some things. And if you want it, that's on YouTube. If anybody wants to hear that, I don't want to, go through the whole thing again so recently, but just another example that generation of guys is that, because Paul was almost 70, or was he 70?
I think he was 71, I want to say.
Yeah. So, I mean, the guys that I was a fan of, and right as I was getting in the business, are, 5, 10 or so years older than me. And it's starting not to be, unheard of. Or an early death or something like that. It's just age and time. And, but like we said, Paul was such a great guy and such a fantastic talent. And I actually, as I got back on my email and everything, and I'm already bad with emails, so if anybody's emailed me lately, I'll see it eventually. But one I did see was from Danny Davis, my partner at OVW, because he had heard about Paul, and he did an angle with Orndorff in Smoky Mountain Wrestling that we all loved. The deal was, when Paul came in to Smoky Mountain, is right as we were getting started on the air, and he was just starting to do, as we talked about, shows again after having time off because of his arm and the nerve injury and everything. And so Bobby Fulton had him booked on that show that I did my pilots at. So I got him on the taping and then talked to him about some other dates, and we had Ronnie Garvin. And so Orndorff and Garvin had worked an early program on Smoky Mountain Wrestling on television and in some of the live events, but that gave me so much credibility, having former NWA world champion Ronnie Garvin. People had seen him on TV for years, especially in the Knoxville market. Orndorff had been Hogan's biggest drawing opponent, 5 years before that in the WWF, and he'd been all over television. So that was credibility. But we didn't talk about the one angle that I did with Orndorff that I really liked, that Danny was involved in. And it also illustrates how you can make something mean something by not giving it to people until you really give it to them. I will explain. Paul Orndorff's finishing hold, as everybody knows, was the pile driver, and he did one of the best ones in the business. I mean, it was just the leaping and the flat sit and the whole 9 yards. He stuck people, but safely.
He got the best jump of anyone.
Yeah, because he was so strong and his legs were so strong. And he could take anybody up. Lawler had a weight limit. And then if you were past such and such, yeah, no.
And the other thing, too, real quick, just Hulk Hogan has a reputation. He didn't want to work with guys that he thought could possibly hurt him. And there he is taking Orndorff's pile driver all the time.
Yeah.
So even he knew Orndorff was strong enough not to hurt him.
Yeah. Paul was he was the guy. But anyway, but when he comes into Smoky Mountain Wrestling, Commissioner Bob Armstrong obviously informs him the pile driver is illegal. And we didn't do that just because of Orndorff. The pile driver should be illegal because that way you can work angles and get heat with it. And that's what we did in Tennessee wrestling, folks. So I had Orndorff cut promos about how automatically he's being conspired against and discriminated against. His best hold, everybody knows that, and he can't use it here. What kind of bullshit is this? And he jousts back and forth with Bob Armstrong and Bob's firm, and anytime he would tease doing a pile driver, the referee'd make sure to grab the guy and stop it. No, you can't do that. And finally, and it's been so long, you may know better than me. I forget what made him flip his fucking lid, but we milked it until finally nobody had seen a pile driver. Orndorff and him hadn't been able to do the pile driver. And then finally on a TV taping, he goddamn loses his shit and not only pile drives the guy he's working with, but also I think Joey Maggs and Hector Guerrero. We ran several people in, and we had like five big jumping, leaping pile drivers, one right after another. And the last one was on Danny Davis. And God, he took the bounce, and he had the nerve damage. His hand was shaking like he had palsy, and he was whimpering because Danny could sell like crazy. And as they're carrying him out of the ring, it hurts. It hurts. Oh my God. So Orndorff had been working the program with Garvin. So, they were obviously had been involved, but I wanted to freshen it up a little bit. And so we did that angle where he just went crazy and Bob Armstrong fined him and whatever. And I think Garvin said he was going to get even or get revenge for Danny Davis, but we had Danny do a VHS tape promo from home. And he's doing the promo where he's holding the arm kind of limp and he's got the neck brace on and he's talking kind of subdued like that. But he did that. He, from the heart, as a man, I've got to do something about this. And I'm going to come back after Paul Orndorff. And his cat walks over and he's sitting on his couch, right? And gets in his lap while he's doing the promo and he's just petting the cat, right? But he's fucking doing a promo for real. I'm hurt, but as a man, I've got to come back. Well, Garvin, I can't even remember how we did this also, but we ended up booking a handicap match where Garvin came back in the picture, and it was Garvin and Danny Davis against Orndorff. And now Orndorff is bitching, wait a minute, now there's two of them. What the fuck? Because he was thinking he was going to kill Danny Davis, a guy not only smaller than him, but also who's fucking got a neck injury and can hardly use one arm. So we had Danny work with the fucking neck brace. He gets a little heat on Danny, but Ronnie would save Danny from fucking certain doom, and it kept that thing going and got the pile driver over. And that was the first person that was allowed to do the illegal pile driver in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And after that angle, and people were carried out and fines were levied, and the people were going crazy when all them guys were bouncing off their fucking heads. It made it something and then when Terry Funk comes in, oh my God, he's going to pile drive Bob Armstrong. Oh shit. Or, when that was the way that Bob Armstrong put me in the hospital. He gave me what was it? 2 pile drivers. It was always protected. You always saw people carried out or hurt or whatever. And there were repercussions. And that's why that people reacted to it whenever it was even teased in a match. But if I hadn't had, I was always going to make the pile driver illegal. We were always going to do, angles around the heels trying to do it or whatever. But if I hadn't had the world's best and foremost proponent of the pile driver to do that first angle on show number 18, we'd milked it for about 4 months. It wouldn't have gotten over nearly as good. And that's when Al Snow did the angle that led to the big showdown on the scaffold between him and Ricky Morton. That's what he did to Ricky. 3 pile drivers in Johnson City. And we called the ambulance, and he was carried out and put in the ambulance and driven off. And there were guys waiting for Al Snow in the fucking parking lot, and girls were crying at ringside. And we actually shot the fucking girls crying and fucking wringing their hands and clutching their pearls. And, that was because something was made out of it, and Orndorff kicked that off. And I was glad to hear from Danny Davis about, him remembering that angle, because it was fun for us to do, because it led to something, and it meant something, and it laid groundwork for something in a new promotion.
He may have had the best pile driver. He also may have had the best lockup. His collar and elbow always looked so competitive and so real.
And he brought that intensity in most everything that he did. I mean, just throwing a punch or dropping those fucking forearms or whatever, everything was intense and aggressive with Paul. And when he was on defense and when he was bumping aggressively. He didn't bump like a big muscle guy. He bumped like a fucking great worker that had the body of a big muscle guy. So, almost everything he did was just so believable and so intense. And he knew what to do for himself. Like I've said so many times, the best wrestlers are the guys that know what they should do and what they shouldn't do. Even if they can do it, the person that they are supposed to be shouldn't do it. And that wasn't hard for Paul because he was basically the person he was supposed to be.
You know, when I got into wrestling, it was really weird with Paul Orndorff. So I get really into wrestling in 89, and he's gone. And there were even whispers amongst the kids I knew that he was dead by that point in time. And when I started getting into it and looking back, he has such an interesting place in WWE history alone, because he, in a lot of ways, is one of the first big hires of the expansion. In 83, they bring him in. And he's aligned with Piper and Schultz. He's in the main event mix. He's in the main event for WrestleMania, yet he's not one of the first batch of action figures. He doesn't make it onto Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling. He's not one of the animated stars. And then, of course, the big run with Hogan after he turns on him, biggest run of Hogan's title reign. And then he's not even on WrestleMania 3. And then a year later, he's gone. It's just such a weird... His WWF run, because he wasn't on the cartoon and he wasn't in Mania 3, it took me a little while to realize and appreciate just how big a star he was there.
Well, I think part of it is, when you think about it, on the cartoon, everybody had a gimmick. Paul would have been standing there in tights. And the action figures, everybody, Iron Sheik, Hulk Hogan, everybody had a gimmick or was some. Paul would have been a wrestler in tights. I don't know, even though he was so integral and was the biggest drawing house show live event program opponent that Hogan ever had, I don't know if Vince ever saw him as, marketable in those aspects. Because I wasn't aware that he didn't have a figure.
No, he had a figure, but he wasn't one of the first. Because
that he didn't get the figure in commensurate with where he was at the time. That's the only thing I can imagine is maybe and on the cartoon or whatever. Because I'd never watched the cartoon, to be honest with you. But how does Hogan's biggest ever live event opponent not get or did they already have the cartoon planned out before that happened to begin with?
Well, the cartoon was planned out in 85, but he was in the mix in 85 as early on as a heel, and then the big babyface turn that eventually aligned him with Hogan so that when he turned on Hogan, it meant something. That all happened. He became friends with Hogan and turned on Hogan within a year and a half.
Well, most people, it doesn't take that long, but that's only in private.
Do you think Ole should have had Orndorff turn on Sting instead of doing the Black Scorpion?
Oh, God, yes. Anything besides the Black Scorpion would have been an improvement, but yeah, Orndorff and Sting would have been incredible. And, that's the thing is that Orndorff was great in pretty much in whatever place you put him, as long as you put him in something Orndorff should be involved in. As a babyface tag team, him and Jimmy Snuka, we talked about in the Carolinas, was great. He was a good babyface and a good heel in Mid-South as a single. He could do pretty much everything, and all of the guys that he got in the ring with had better matches. I think if Sting in that time period, Sting and Luger were having great matches like that, Sting and Orndorff would have been incredible.
I just think it would have been a better decision. You had Orndorff there. He was aligned with Sting as a babyface, which was kind of miscasting Orndorff, obviously. He walks off after Sting wins at Great American Bash 90, which teased something that never happened. And he was just, 4 years off the feud with Hogan. It would have been perfect for Sting's first challenger as the world champion, instead of a mystical wizard who appeared and disappeared and eventually was exposed as being Ric Flair.
But you know what? Now that you've said that, was that the time that Paul was about to take off because of the arm?
No, because, he already had the arm issue. And you know what? I actually think, everyone says he hurt his neck during the Hogan feud and he didn't want to stop because he was making all that money and that led to the atrophy in his arm. I think if you look at photos of him, even as far back as Mid-South, he already has some of the atrophy. I don't know if anyone's ever picked up on that, but if you really look at him like in 82, the atrophy's already starting at that point.
I had not looked that closely, but I can believe it because, it's all, he had wrestled a hard style and he'd been in the business for several years by that point, and it's only going to get worse. And especially he was up there 83 through 86 especially, those were those concrete rings in the WWF. So
those concrete tours.
Oh God. But yeah, I've got, I took pictures of Orndorff in 77 in Louisville, him doing the double bicep and everything, and both arms were exactly the same. So we know he started out even in 77.
Well, everyone obviously very sad about the passing of Paul Orndorff, and we've seen lots of stories and lots of clips going around, and we send our condolences to his friends and family.